Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the studio. Today our aim is going to be bringing the little female figure in this composition to completion. The only thing we have left is a little bit of modeling and sculpting 2 tiny feet. We're closing in on finishing this piece, a few more sessions, and it should be all done. Let's get into today's video. According to my YouTube analytics, over 75% of you watching this are not subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy my content, want to support the channel and get the most recent upload in your feed so you don't miss it, subscribe to the channel by hitting that little red subscribe button on the bottom right hand side of the video. It's free for you and it helps me out a lot. Whenever I delve into previously unexplored territory, which the lower legs are at this point, I use information already established, already believed to be true to help me establish them. In this scenario, the ACES point on the pelvis down to the bottom of the knee corresponded with the length from the bottom of the knee to the ankle. This is not always the case, and I use measurements like this on an individual basis. That measurement worked for this model, but it's not the general rule of thumb, and it's not going to work on everyone. That's why you must make sure that you use your own model and double check with them. Fingers as calipers gets me close enough at the scale to what I need. They are of course pretty rough and not something I would use if a more accurate measurement was needed. But here, for what this is and for what I need right now, the finger calipers does the trick. Any small adjustment I have to make can be done by using my eyes, which for most of us are going to be more accurate than any finger caliper or comparative measurement for that matter. Once you're close, that's when it's a good idea to let the eyes do the last little bit of work. I'm doing everything I can here to get as much gesture out of these legs as possible. There are many things to consider when attempting to get more gesture out of a figure that's part of a 2-figure composition. A main one is how does the 2 figures interact? The negative space between the 2 figures needs to work really well. We need to avoid unpleasant design here. Like the contours of the 2 figures passing really close to each other, which will create an awkwardly narrow negative shape. There's a lot to consider in addition to the 2 figures themselves. It's pretty new to me to have to consider the fact that the space between the figures matters so much, perhaps as much as the shape of the figures themselves. Considering these negative shapes, along with a few other things, made me make the adjustment from the previous maquette of this and let both legs on the female figure hang down touching the base instead of interacting with Kronos, like in the previous version. This is going to lend me some freedom when it comes to mold making and casting later on, and it also opens up the negative space between the 2 figures from the front up into one large shape instead of one really small shape and one really large one. And I much prefer this to the previous version. It's very nice to have a flexible armature so that you have the chance to make adjustments to the gesture as you move along. I always use aluminum armature wire for this reason. The little female is suspended with aluminum armature wire as well, which gives me tremendous freedom to move her if I need to or want to. It's great to have this because it can be tough to guess where the clay is going to end up. Which is partially why I started with Kronos and only later built the armature for the female figure, then sculpted her. Even doing it this way does not guarantee that everything is going to work out. Having her suspended on that flexible armature means that I can move her and control the negative space between the 2 figures as I sculpt her. And it turned out to be a really good decision that I'll have to attempt to recreate somehow in the over life-size version of this piece. For this really small-scale figure, it can be hard to get the clay into the right place every time you lay clay down. It's easy to put down too much as well because the amounts you need are so small. As you can see, I combat this by using my rake to define a lot of the shapes and the contours instead of my usual trick of defining them with clay notes during the blocking. It's kind of needed at this scale, at least for me, to maintain control and get the fine movements of the contour properly represented. It's a good idea to work both sides of the figure at the same time, in other words, both legs in this video. However, I'm not doing that here and that's regrettable. I know it's better to do so, but I'm getting a bit tunnel visioned here, or I was getting a bit tunnel visioned here and focusing in on one thing. This is a little typical for me, especially when I get into detailed work, and while this leg, or while a leg, isn't usually detailed work as it's kind of a big and broad form, a large form, in this scale, it is very small, and so it is kind of like detailed work. And so I'm only working on one at a time. It's a bit of a bad habit, and one I shouldn't be doing, and certainly one I don't want to teach you. But here it is on tape. Everyone makes mistakes, I guess. Making sure the contour moves well is paramount to success here. Gesture and movement can take place in the overall, but I like to have gesture and movement on multiple levels to create more interest and drama. Gesture can be achieved by placing bony points above each other in an offset way, meaning that the bony points don't line up. But I like to make sure that there is a ton of movement in the contour as well, especially here, since I have some freedom to interpret my subject and what she offers. You'll notice how the contour from the front view is especially important to me. Normally the contour from the front view of the individual figure would be the focal point and the most important one, usually at least. Here, however, the side view of the female figure's legs are the front view of the composition, and the front view of this composition is the main view that I'm trying my best to make as interesting as possible. There are a few ways to do this. You can accentuate or exaggerate the offset between the high points of the forms front to back. Make sure that the high points of the forms on the front of the thigh, for example, don't sit directly across from the high points of the back of the thigh. This line of thinking can be continued down the entire leg. Notice, for example, how the high point of the heel is not directly across from the high point on the top of the foot. This offset between the high points on the front and the back of the leg is almost always there, but sometimes to a lesser degree. But here, I've given them a little extra, in order to make what I think at least is a little more interesting of a leg. Just as you can do this with high points, you can do it with low points, and you should. In addition to offsetting the low points are also where you need to look for contours moving in space. A negative angle break usually means that there is a passage of form, that one form moves in front of another. This also can add a lot of drama, and so whenever possible I look for passages of form whenever I see a negative angle break. Think of a line drawing using a pencil of the figure. To create a sense of three-dimensional space using line, you need to use overlaps. These overlaps describe the same passages of form we in sculpture need to construct with our contours. At this point, any extra wire has to go. I've decided on how long the legs are going to be, and it's time to commit to that decision. Cutting the armature too early can certainly be fixed by attaching more wire, but it's never a clean solution, and it's never as stable as just keeping each leg as one wire. I like to cut the wire to a length that allows a little bit of extra wire to stick into the foot, perhaps halfway down the foot. If the sculpture was bigger, I prefer to have the wire go a bit further, especially if the foot is suspended. In a similar fashion, I like to have the armature for the arms, which I don't have on the female figure of course, extended into the palm of the hand, but only at smaller scales. If the sculpture is large enough and it makes sense to make a hand armature, I prefer to do so. I'm trying to go for as much gesture as I can. I have mentioned this already. The idea is to have a bit of tension in one leg and the other one appearing rather limp. In order to achieve this, I decided to have the right foot rolled over so that the top of the foot is contacting the ground and not the bottom of the foot. In the larger version, this gives me the chance to do some fun modeling of the forms on the bottom of the foot. The opportunities to model the bottom of a foot are far and few between, so I'll take one where I can. On a more serious note, this adds fluidity and gesture to the female figure. It also curves the right leg inwards, and if we draw a line down the 2 feet, they meet at one point, which I find to feel and look quite elegant. At the same time, it draws the eye of the viewer into the sculpture, which is something I try to achieve everywhere in this piece. Lines that hold the viewer's attention on the work and doesn't lead the viewer on to the next work or a work across the room, for example. And it's certainly not something I came up with. I don't think I read it anywhere, but I noticed it in works by Michelangelo and a few others. I probably heard it somewhere, heard it mentioned at some time. I don't know. I definitely didn't invent the concept, however. As you can probably see, the feet here are sculpted in very much the same way as the last video in this series. It's much more of an impression of feet rather than actual feet, and that's okay. Often enough, you'll see feet painted this way if they are not meant to be the focal point of the painting, that is. You'll also see this style of foot, the foot sock, as I like to call it, in a lot of pencil drawings done where I work at the Florence Academy of Art, where the feet themselves are not the focal point, but the overall impression of the figure is the most important part of the drawing. This follows very much down the same path. I don't need to render the feet to know what they will look like because, number one, they are not the focal point here. Number two, this is a maquette for a larger piece, and I'd like to leave some mystery for myself to discover in the larger piece. The exact modeling of the feet can be explored in the over life-size project. For this piece, the position where the feet are located in relationship to everything else is important. And the gesture of the feet themselves is important too, of course. Once that's solved, that's really all I need. Well, this did end up being a sculpture in its own right, I guess. Its original purpose was as a sketch for a larger piece, a design maquette. Either way, as a sculpture on its own, or as a sketch or design maquette, sculpting feet in this scale, in this way, is something that I find tends to work very well visually. The last little bit of work here is going to be cleaning up the back a bit, completing the forms there and making minor adjustments. There is something to be said for a surface that's finished and whole, complete, without holes and rough sections or something like that. Holes or other strange things can work really well visually, but I tend to go for a more complete look where the surface is whole, like this was made out of skin and bone, I guess, however morbid that sounds. For the modeling to function well, I need a lot of tension in the back, which means a lot of sharp transitions because of the gesture that we have going on here. At the same time, as I'm completing these forms, I'm also going to look for two different kinds of opportunities. The first is looking for places where more information that will better help describe the action taking place can be added. One such place is the raised left shoulder. We can definitely add more tension in that shoulder by carving in some more separation between the different fibers in the deltoid muscle. I change some transitions as well, as this can help add more tension in certain parts of the body. Even this late in the game, we're looking for ways to improve. Obviously, we have to stop at some point, but not settling and always looking for a little bit more that will help your sculpture is a good mindset to get into and stay in while working. And your work can only get better by doing this. The second opportunity we're looking for is volume. Wherever I can, I add a little bit of volume, usually between the high point of a form and the edge of a form. The amount of clay added is very small because the scale is so small, but it still helps the sculpture read much better. Instead of looking gray, dull, and flat, the sculpture has the full range of values and looks striking and interesting. Or at least, that's the hope. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for more videos. I put out a new video every Thursday, so stay tuned for next week. If you want to support the channel, visit the link to my Patreon page in the description below the video to learn how. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and I hope to see you in the next one.